back, and it's Wednesday, which means we're doing another live stream watercolor demo, and today we're going to be talking about portraits. This was one of the suggestions that I okay, I'm going to try this again. I guess I can't say it. Okay, I keep getting this request for portraits. So I'm going to revisit this one. Every time you do one, of course, it's a little bit different. And I'm just going to switch on over here. Now, this is the portrait that I'm going to do. If you're looking for the reference for this, it is from a website called Unsplash. Oh, wait a minute. Let me move my mic over a little closer here. Just realized I'm kind of far away. How about that? That's probably a little better, right? So anyway, this reference picture is from Unsplash, and the link to it is under the description for this video. So you can take there. Yeah, sorry about that, folks. I had my mic, I forgot to pull my mic over in front of me. So anyway, this is a demo that has been requested quite a lot. Not this one specifically, but portraits in general. So this is one that I selected from Unsplash, and let me just tell you why I selected this one. I especially liked the lighting on her. Okay, so what I'm looking for when I want to do a watercolor portrait is I'm looking for a value difference between the shadow and the highlight. Sometimes if you take a reference that was done, say, in a photo studio or something like that, and there's lights to the left and lights to the right and up and down and everywhere, and it fills in all of the shadows. Keep in mind that what you really need when you are doing a watercolor portrait is you need shadows, because if you don't have any shadows, you can't create the form on a 2D surface. Right? Everything would be the same value, and it would look like an unfinished painting, or it would just look very flat. So last week I talked a lot about drawing, and we talked about comparing measurements and things like that. Today will be more of a lesson, I guess, on observing value differences. And this is really important in portraits because the value changes are gradual in most cases, right? So for example, I've got my little squares. These are just little scraps of paper and or cardboard, and I have put a little hole in it, and I want to compare the difference between the dark that you can see in the hole here and this one here, which is almost white. So I would be leaving pretty much the white of the paper here in this area. This is such a valuable little tool that you can use so that you can figure out whether or not the balance of light and dark within your painting is working. Until you're trained to actually recognize it sort of more intuitively, this is a great tool. So even left to right, you know, we've got a lighter pink and we've got a much duller, darker pink here. So I'm going to start first of all with the drawing. I haven't drawn this out. Drawing out a portrait is often very scary for people, and if it frightens you, I would say practice it first of all. But if you're just looking to get to the painting part, I personally have no objection to using something like a graphite paper. So you could tape down this portrait that I've printed out pretty much to the right size, and I would tape that down so it doesn't shift or move, and then tape it across the top, and then I would place my graphite paper with the dark side down underneath and basically create my outline. I will do that as a shortcut, but since as a follow-up to last week's where we were talking about drawing and perspective and all of that sort of thing, I think it's important that I take a little extra time and just do a bit of drawing here to begin with. So remember last week if you were with me last week. If you weren't with me last week, I was doing a demonstration on perspective and proportion. And similar properties apply to doing a portrait. So if I take the width of her face and compare from her chin to the top of her head, you can see that it's obviously taller than it is wide. Now that's an obvious one. We all know that. But there are certain things, like, for example, from, say, the back of her head, I imagine the back of her head is right about here, and I measure from my thumb is marking the back of her head to the middle of her eye, and then I slide that over, and I can see that this eye is way closer to this side than it is to the back of her head. Now, depending on the angle of your head, like, you know, whether it's a 3/4 turn or it's straight on or whatever, those proportions are going to change, and people tend to forget that. So there's going to be a lot of unusual shapes and things like that as you go. Okay. You guys are having trouble with sound? It's looking fine on my end. Okay. It might be out your way. I'm not sure, but it looks like it's working perfectly fine on my monitor here. All right, so with my reference really close by, let me try and move this out of the way without knocking it all off the table. Okay. I hit something there. Okay. So with here, well, you don't need to see me. Let's get me out of there. There I am. Okay. So with this portrait, in close proximity to where I'm going to be drawing, I am going to find the middle of her face, basically where her nose is running down. And it's not in the middle of the page, it's to the left of the page. Okay, that's the middle of her face. Now I've already determined that like her eye is closer to this side, and of course the nose is. So what I will do, it's very much, you're going to see a lot of similarity to the a lot of similarity to the video I did last week. Sorry, I'm sort of hesitating because I'm reading and trying to talk at the same time, and apparently I don't do both well. So at the middle of the nose here and the side of the cheek here compared to where the back of her head is, wow, that's a huge difference. This is where a lot of things can go wonky. So the back of her head may be way, way back here. Okay, so that's, I hope I'm making those lines dark enough. I don't want to do them too dark because, of course, if I'm drawing right on my watercolor paper, it means I have to erase a lot. And erasing is not good for the painting process. So I prefer to use a kneaded eraser, and you can see this one's a little bit hard right now, but I will warm it up in my hands and stretch it out, and it will get a lot more pliable and will be great for lightening up lines. So her face is going to fit within this area here, between that line and that line. Her nose is going to land here. I'm going to determine where her eyes are and whether or not her eyes are aligned. Now they look like they're pretty straight, but there's just a very, very slight angle. And so I'm going to incorporate that slight angle there. All right, so I'm going to do some measurements again. I'm going to measure the width of her head and the distance from her eye, which I've already determined, to the bottom. Okay, so it can't be this long. Cannot be that long because I already determined that her chin was about here on my pencil. So if I did that measurement, let's try this again. All right, her chin would be about here. Okay, and it looks like it's too close to her eyes, but don't forget, there's an ear and everything that's going to go in here. There's hair that's going to be covering it. The actual front of her face, I'm gesturing with my hands, is up on my face, like you can see it. But her actual face is going to fit within this area here, in which case that doesn't look like it's so close. So there's a lot of things can throw you off here. So instead of drawing what you think you see, start measuring. I think that can be a really, really good thing. Sorry, some of you are still talking about sound being funny, and some of you are saying it's fine. So I have a feeling if you're having any trouble with sound, it is most likely at your end. It is, it's working for some, and it looks like it's working fine here. All right, so check your settings. Or leave and come back. Sometimes that fixes things, right? So I'm looking at the angle of her cheek. Now, remember what I said last week. I think of angles like hands on a clock. So if this were the center of the clock, the middle of her cheek, I'm looking at this angle, and it's a little after five, on the hands of the clock would be a little after the 5 on the clock. So if her chin were a clock, if that were the middle of the clock right there, I'm looking at this angle of her chin right here, and I would say that's about a 2 o'clock angle. Okay, now it's a little curved, so I can correct that by curving. I'm gonna create curves and things as I go, but I'm really just looking for the main structure so far. All right, so now I will look for her ear. It's a little lower than her eye here, but the top of her ear pretty much lines up with the top of her eye. So I'm going to put in this ear structure. And you'll notice I use a lot of straight lines when I'm drawing. That's to give it more structure, and for some weird reason, it's easier for us to understand straight lines than it is for us to understand curved lines. We can take this and basically act like a woodworker and carve away the shapes once we have the main measurements in there. So straight lines are better for measurement. Okay, so in where her eye is, try to get this all on here. Out where her brow line is. And now her hair's covering some of this, but I am pretty certain that I've got a head structure something like this. Now you'll notice that the neckline comes from under the ear. And I'm saying all of this out loud because this is my thought process as I'm going along here. And then an angle. We've got another angle here. I would say that's about a 4, between a 4 and a 5 angle from her chin. Just not quite from the center of the chin, but the neck comes down like so. And soon after the chin here, we've got her shoulder happening. Straight down, angle again. Okay, so we've got another, like we've got her actual shoulder. It's got clothing. She's got her black dress on or whatever, shirt. And this is going to continue. Angle again, looking at that angle and thinking in terms of a clock. I think that needs to go down. That angle there, I had a little bit too close to 9 o'clock, and it really does need to come down a little bit steeper, so I think that's better. And this shoulder should drop a little bit more too. Once you change one thing, more things begin to change as well. I've got two erasers on the go here. I've got this I've got a nylon eraser plus a kneaded eraser. The kneaded eraser is actually better on watercolor paper because you can roll it, which means less abrasion on the paper. This one doesn't work unless you actually rub back and forth. So then you're abrasing the surface. All right, so if you have a question for me as I'm going along, if you put it in capital letters, I can spot it more quickly when I glance up at the chat. But I'm going to carry on here. Now her hair, oh my goodness, her hair is voluminous. So I'm just going to give some basic lines where I feel like the hair goes. Not quite that far over. Now, a lot of these lines I'll end up having to erase because these are working lines. They will interfere with the painting process. And of course, if you're using anything light, all these lines are going to end up showing through. So there will be a lot of sort of correction that I'll have to do and erasing. I'm determining her eyebrows, now her eyes. Now, I'm really looking, I'm going to put the nose in before I do the eyes because the nose will affect the, where the placement of the eyes are. And I do know that the nose is in the middle. Carol Ann has a question. How would I measure for a portrait if you're doing it with a live model? You would extend your arm and use your pencil as a measuring tool, but extend your arm because that means the distance from your eye will be locked. If you kind of go back and forth like this, each time you're measuring, it's going to throw all your measurements off. So lock your arm till, there's no bend in your elbow, and hold it, and you'll do your measurements, with your thumb or whatever. So you can even close one eye. Sometimes you'll see artists close one eye because that helps them with the measurement even further. And for some of you, there's a tool. Let me see if I can grab it here. This is called a proportional divider, and some people really like using these. I've tried this, and it's okay. I prefer to do it sort of by sight instead of using this. But basically what this does, if you have a reference picture, or even if you're drawing from life, and you could hold this tool at arm's length as well, and basically you'll see that works like scissors, and you can adjust which hole these go into and that sort of thing. But this measurement here will proportionally enlarge on the other end. So if you have something, if you're looking at something large, maybe a building or something, and you want to put it on your paper as a smaller building, then you will get this sort of automatic resizing, I guess, if you will. So as long as you're working on the same pivot, you can measure something. So if I were to measure her eye, for example, measure the width of her eye, and then if I were enlarging this portrait, then that would be a good measurement for her eye. Likewise, the width of her face would proportionally make the width of this. So you could take this kind of thing and make the marks on your paper to help you with the actual resizing of something, or to keep things in proportion, hence the name proportional divider. And so it's kind of a neat tool. I find that I guess I've been drawing long enough that I find it's just faster for me to do it this way. Yes, that might be more accurate. There's always a grid system as well if you are working from a photograph, but of course you can't do that from life. And so let's start at the middle of her nose. The middle of her nose, and I'm looking at the angle of the nose here, and I would say that's just a little after, it's between 6 and 7. If this were a clock and that were the center of the clock, the angle of her nose between 6 and 7. So it's fairly steep. I'm also kind of looking at how far from this cheek it is so that I don't get all wonky there. This is a lot like babysitting a bunch of kids, right? You got to keep your eye on everything. So I'm going to find the other side of her nostril here. Little lower, I think. Just a little bit lower. And then there's like little micro measurements, I guess, that you could start making. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. See if you can see this just a little bit better. And it's a surprise, because if I look at the corner of the mouth here and the corner of the mouth here, the bottom lip, I would expect that to come from the corner, but because her head is angled, it's not coming from the corner, it's coming from here. The center, remember I picked the center of her face here? That's where the middle of they call this part of the mouth, this part between the nose and the lip, the philtrum. And this philtrum will tell you where the center of the lip is. This one, I actually think that I didn't make that far enough. This looks like it's over here a little bit more. All right, so I'm not going to finish the lips. I'm not going to finish the nose. I'm not going to do anything. It's just like last week when we were talking about drawing. Do the big shapes, leave the detail for when the big shapes are in the right place and the right size and the right shape. So her eye here actually comes in contact with the bridge of her nose. So I also see that the corner of her eye is in the corner. Look at this. It's actually a straight line there. This is where so many people want, your brain, this is your brain fighting with you. They want to make the corner of the eye a corner. All right, and we've got a shadow that comes down here from her brow. And this eye, we do see all of it. I think I'm going to have to move that ear a little bit. And so this drawing process ends up, there's always some correction. I haven't drawn a portrait in a while, but I can see there's not enough room here between the eye and the ear. You see, I need quite a bit of space right there. So there's a little adjustment I have to make here. Her ear needs to move back more, which makes me understand why I was having a little trouble with the hair here. Okay, so the back of her neck now also moves over a little bit. Okay, that seems to fit better at this stage, I think. In my opinion, anyway. Of course, standing back is always a good thing because it helps you to see the overall proportions a little better for some reason. You step away, I guess you kind of eliminate your detail. Now I'm mapping out where the highlights are, because I know those are the areas I'm going to have to keep really light. But I can't leave the line drawing there. I can't leave it there and do the face because the pencil lines are all going to show through. The size of the pupil is very important as well, or the size of the iris and pupil, I should say. It doesn't land in the middle. The eyes have to be aligned. It looks a little bit odd otherwise. Okay, so it almost looks a bit like cubism at the moment because of all the straight angles. But I will start carving this out. Then I will erase my working lines, and I'll be able to do a little bit more. I think I need to zoom out a little bit again. Okay, so we have her lid, and I'm noticing in the eye that the top of the iris is missing, but I actually do see the entire bottom of the iris. So the top part, it gets hidden under that upper lid. One thing I am going to point out, I'm just going to zoom in on the picture here for a second. People see the dark eyelashes, right? And when they're doing the drawing, they'll make the dark eyelash. And just like the mouth that I was talking about, you want to take it from this corner and go right over to the tip of the eyelash. But look closely. the actual eye, the white of the eye, ends here, way past or way before the end of the tip of the eyelash. So don't fall into that trap. Always look for, what's actually happening rather than assuming. So there's a straight line here where you see sort of the edge of the white eyeball. And here we've got, there's only a little space there. So right here is the edge of her eye, and it doesn't come to a point. Same here, the bridge of the nose. This bridge of the nose is actually hiding the corner of the eye here. So we don't see it. It's actually hidden, so. So this may not be like the ultimate likeness, but structure-wise, I think I'm getting much closer here. So I'm gonna look at this ear here for a second. Come into focus, camera. Okay. So for this ear, ears are always a little strange. There's always the little bump right here in the middle, that little V, and then of course we have the lobe which hangs down. But I'm looking at the basic cavity shape. Let's call it that. Comes in, and I'm just following this line down and across. Then there's a like almost a triangle up here. Right here, you can see there's a triangle there. So a triangle, and then this shape here, which is a little bit of a weird shape, but that's the general structure. Okay. This hair starts coming out here. Okay, so that's making a little more sense. And so there's a lot of kind of adjusting that you have to do as you go along. The nostril is not the same on each side because of her head being turned. So it's not always what you think. I do feel like I have to do something better with her mouth, though. I've made her mouth too small. This line actually should come over here. And if I'm looking to see where it lines up on this side, let's go straight up. Okay, it lines up with the kind of the white of her eye. So if this were the tear duct here, it would line right up with that over to here. So I had her mouth a little bit too small. So I need to do a correction there. And I'm looking down, up, slightly. Not quite a straight line. A slight upturn there. The opening of the mouth. She's just got her lips parted slightly. So just gonna make that a little opening right there. I made a mark there, I didn't mean to. And this, oddly, you would think that this would dip down, but because of the angle, it's actually kind of rounded to that corner of the mouth. Little unexpected. So if you're drawing out a portrait, you really need to look so many times and make the necessary corrections. All right, so zoom out again. All right, so press the wrong button there. Let me zoom out and we'll see whether or not I've got this sort of right. I think I'm getting pretty close here. I think not too bad. But what really will kind of determine things is the shading. Okay, so now as I'm erasing some of my working lines, I will talk a little bit about shading. If you determine the shading and not think so much about the lines, I think you're going to have a much stronger painting, because the structure of the lights and darks, or the values, the structure of the values is more important than actual lines within your painting. Now, I won't do too much with her hair, because her hair is going to be very dark, so I don't have to erase a lot there. But what I will do with hair is I will kind of find a grouping. So her bangs kind of come up like this, or I guess it's not bangs, it's just the way she's got her hair swept over her forehead like this, and then there's a little bit of a curl. So she's got, little bits of curl here and there, and I would group all that together so that I understand the structure of her hair. I'm definitely not going to be fussing over individual hairs. That's definitely not going to happen. But I won't worry about all these little strands just yet. I'm looking at the big shapes here. So this big grouping here, I'm just finding where that goes, and but in terms of these shadows, okay, so the shadows are so important. As I'm cleaning up my lines and everything, I want to make sure that I'm not, when there's a transition, like from the darkness over here to the lightness over there, I don't want to see any pencil lines through there. So I do have to be careful, and I do have to erase them, but I'm kind of putting them in there in the drawing process and then taking them out helps me to determine whether or not I've got other proportions correct. So it's there just as a working step, if you will. Should be using this eraser. So I can take all those angled lines that I had, and I can start curving them now. Do my lines. I usually don't do my lines very dark. But I know I'm teaching it, so I need to show you the lines. So my lines are going to be darker than I normally would do. We totally see the crease in this eye, but we don't see it in the opposite eye. Interesting. Things are often not as expected. Okay. Finally, I'm going to get to the painting. One thing that helps a lot of people is to understand that the placement of shadows is so important. So if that's so important, why not put that in first? I know that seems a little backwards, especially for a watercolor painter. But if I put in a light shadow, I mean, it can be basically a ghost version for a beginning. But I'm going to take something like a blue or a purple. Actually, I prefer purple. So I'm going to mix up a purple. I'm going to make a cobalt. Let's bring this over now. Or even a cerulean and a red. But this is a rose d'or, and it will end up a little gray, but it'll be a purple gray. That was cerulean and rose d'or. Rose d'or is very similar to Scarlet Lake. Now I could use cobalt and permanent rose. Like there's any number of combinations you can use. This is going to be very light. This is just basically locking in where my colors need to be. Now I will soften as I go along because I don't want to have any hard lines on her face. But I'm going to I'm going to mix a little more here. I want to make sure I've got enough runny paint so that I can blend it out easily. If I put down color that is too dry, it will not allow me the chance to soften things. So I've got kind of a purple here, and maybe take another blue. It doesn't matter, right? I just need to have a very pale purple color. And this is a little bit like a grisaille, if you've heard of that term before, the grisaille method. And this shadow comes down to her eye. Actually, it comes right over her eye. And that shadow on her cheek. Now, before it dries, let's soften this edge. Straight line there. Side of her nose is very shaded. There's a straight line that comes around across the bottom of her lip, I should say. This whole thing is in shadow. I'll deal with the hair separately because it is very dark in this case. Rinse my brush. Let's soften up some of these lines. This little bit of dark here helps to emphasize the lightness on her nose, the lighter highlight on her nose. Going to soften this a little bit. Now I might have blossoms, I might have, I might have all kinds of things I don't like. Obviously if I were just doing this in my own free time, I would take all the time to smooth things out and deal with that. But I don't mind a blossom. I think a blossom kind of adds that handmade effect to your painting. But I'm going to come back up into the hair now. And a lot of her hair is very dark, but I will leave a couple of highlight areas, key spaces that will help me to understand the structure of the hair. So for example, I'm running low on paint here. For example, I might leave like this highlight, this shine on her hair. I might just leave that white and got a little piece of undissolved, hard to fit everything on here, a little bit of undissolved red here, so I'm trying to get it worked in before I hit my paper with it, or I'll have a big red mark. So I'm not worried about individual hairs or anything like that. I'm looking for the basic structure. My mix was a little different this time than it was when I first mixed it, and that's fine. All of these are going to get layered up with several layers of color. In fact, I often don't even worry so much about the hair. I mean, the hair, we always connect with the eyes, right? So sometimes the hair can just sort of soften into the background, that sort of thing. But if it changes color, big deal, doesn't matter. So much of this gets covered up with even darker color that, the actual shade of purple is really kind of not very important at all. But I'm looking for the darks, and I'm really looking for things like the curve of the face here. So I do like to transfer my drawings because it's a lot faster. If I really took a lot of time, I could get this like much even more accurate for sure. I missed, oh no, I think I got a little bit of that highlight. Try to work around highlights if I can. Still using that big brush, so it's a little awkward, but the opening in the mouth here is quite dark. and sure doesn't look like her just yet. You know, miles to go before we're done sort of thing, but I'm just going to build up a little bit more. And I'm not going to worry, just for speed's sake, I'm not going to worry about blending everything, because blending everything does take quite a bit of time, and drying and all of that sort of thing. So if I get some blossoms, or if I get some hard lines where you think they shouldn't be, just know that I am aware of that, and that it is just more of a speed element, trying to work a little faster kind of thing. So if you use thinner layers, as I'm doing here, you'll see that the buildup is much easier to achieve. Thinner layers. And if you have multiple thinner layers, what you'll end up with is a smoother looking portrait anyway. So I am sort of working on the building up of the shadows, and it seems very strange that I'm doing it in these colors, but I'm going to switch over to my fleshy tones very shortly. And you're probably looking at this and thinking, well, why isn't she doing this, or why isn't she doing that? It's funny how we all focus on a different spot in the process. But this triangle, very important in terms of understanding the lighting. Which is a nice straight nose. All right. It's kind of a mess right now. I am fully aware that it is kind of a mess right now, but I want to start thinking now about what colors I might use and preserving some of the lights. Now let me just check back here. I know that there's got to be some questions. What determines whether you paint wet on wet or wet on dry? That's, well, depends. Like if I'm doing a child and it absolutely has to be very smooth, I will often work on wet. So I will wet the face, I will work around the eyes, that sort of thing. And just to show you the difference, I will wet this face here, and I will work on wet for the next stage. Now, when I'm working on wet, the reason I hesitate to work too much on wet is because the if you wet all of it and don't preserve some of the light, the whites or the highlight areas, once again the face starts getting flat. So I'm going to take a little raw sienna, and I'm going to mix that. I like permanent rose mixed with this, so a golden color mixed with a pink red gives me a this type of skin tone. I did a portrait some time ago with dark skin as well. So if you have somebody with a really dark complexion, there's that video, which maybe I'll add that to the to the link. But as I work in here, you'll see that the paint will spread, and often the highlights, especially small ones like around the nose and things like that, end up getting kind of filled in. So you do have to be careful when you are doing this wet on wet business. So if I paint, I don't want to lose all my highlights here, so I'm just going to work around some things. But if I were to paint her skin tone in here, you'll see that all those shadows that I put in will end up coming through. It's transparent color here that I've mixed up, very watery kind of paint, so of course it's transparent, and it will show through. Now this here definitely needs some softening, so I could have wet it first, but I'm just going to wet it now, or dampen it now. I'll use a damp brush to soften that. And you see a lot of the hard lines end up kind of disappearing under the layers anyway. But see, I would just leave the white of the paper to emphasize the highlights. As I said, some of your most effective watercolors are going to be the ones where you have light and shadow. Well, if you eliminate the light, your shadows don't mean as much. Do I use a hot press paper for portraits? I do not. I am using Arches 140-pound cold press paper at the moment. I think this is Arches. It might be Fabriano. I'm not sure. I stretched this and I didn't mark it. But all right, so even if you're messy, you can still get a pretty good basis for your painting. Now I'm going to come into the eyes, and this may surprise you, but I'm going to put the skin color in parts of the eyes here. Not, I think I'll leave this one here, but this one, I'm going to go right over the eye there, which seems like the wrong thing to do, but yeah, whites of the eyes aren't actually white. They're surprisingly dark. All right, let's lift a little here, make sure it doesn't get too dark. The bridge of her nose, I'm just going to lift a little there. Look at that triangle starting to fill in, so I have to be careful I don't lose it. A lot of people will paint like around the lips, but you have to understand that lips are also skin. So the color of the lips, like the darker color of the lips, will cover over the skin tone that you paint on them. So otherwise it looks like everybody's got lip liner on and a hard line there. So take it right underneath. The only thing you might leave behind, like I did here, is a little highlight on the lip. That might be the only part that I don't paint into with the skin tone. Oops, wrong color here. All right, so I am going to continue with some of this, and I will build up on top of the shadows that I have. And what you'll find is that those under layers of shadows are guiding me and telling me where I need to build up a little bit more of the value. A couple of questions coming up. Carolyn's asking, would I ever base a composition on the value structure of the subject? If so, are there rules of thumb that you could apply, like rules of thirds? I wouldn't say any specific, because every scenario is so different. So but there's, you know, that blue that I put down there, that purple, I should say, it's almost disappearing now under the layers, right? But it is very important to have like the white of the paper coming through the highlight areas. That is exceedingly important in portraiture. Well, in watercolor for that matter, in my opinion, anyway. Margot says, I've come in late. Please tell me what paints make up the facial shadows. I used a cerulean blue plus a rose d'or, but you could use pretty much any blue plus red in order to create a purple. I wouldn't go too garish. I picked a reddish, an orange red rather than a pink red, so that it wouldn't be so vibrant a purple. But other than that, nope, it doesn't have to be a specific blue or a specific red. Everybody's got different paints anyway. Okay, so let's continue on. I'm going to keep building up here. Building up shadows. My paper's still a little wet, so hopefully I don't get a lot of blossoms, but we'll see. And again, I'm going to have to soften some lines as I go here. Blotting my brush, soften my lines. The underside of her chin's pretty dark here, so I need to build that up. And right under the lip, that little indent under the lip, that gets pretty dark too. Soften this edge. Just with a quick rinse and a blot is good for softening. Now I'm just setting my brush down for a second here because I want to lift a little bit. I see because I wet an area, it is wanting to sort of fill in, so I'm pulling up some of my highlights here again so they don't get lost. Keeping an eye on things here. So one of the reasons I thought this was kind of a nice portrait to try out was because you can see by the wall that there is light streaming in from a window or a skylight or something like that. It's coming in on an angle, so it's creating some interesting light on her face. It's not just the standard, oh, the left side of her face is light and the right side is dark, that sort of thing. Which video Shelley teaches about waxing my paper? Oh, I do have a video on that. I think it's called Stretching and Mounting Watercolor Paper. I believe it's on that one, if I'm not mistaken. All right, so continuing to build. Always looking for where I can build up the shadows, because the shadows make it more and more dimensional. The more I build up these shadows. There are some fabulous portrait watercolorists online. Lots of YouTube videos and that sort of thing. Many of them are not tutorials so much as they are demonstrations. So In other words, there's no audio or there's music and it's high speed. So they're not telling you colors and they're not telling you, you know, all their process. Although you can sort of watch the process as the painting builds. I'm getting to the point where, okay, I can see where the shadows are and all of that sort of thing. And I'm going to switch to a smaller brush here, and I'm going to start locking in a little bit of darker color. So I'm going to take some burnt sienna. Oh, my burnt sienna dried up. Some burnt sienna. I can mix it. Let me see. Burnt sienna, a little Payne's gray will give me a nice rich brown, rich dark brown. And if I'm painting something like eyes or something like that, I want to make sure I don't lose the highlights, like the shine in the eye, because of course we all know that's the life of the eye, right? There's no reason for me to paint around the pupil because the pupil's darker. And we'll do this one here. Her eyes are kind of greenish hazel, I think. So I could change this up, put a little green in there, that sort of thing. But I'm more concerned with the value. So I can get a pretty good portrait as long as I get the values correct. It'll be a win, right? As long as I get all those values so that they are, you know, properly in harmony with everything else. Okay. So there's a nice dark in there. We can come across and use some of this even in the hair. Now I'm not gonna fuss a lot with hair today. In most cases it's getting the face right for most people, but I do have other videos on portraiture, so they you can refer to some of those in order to learn more specifically about eyes or mouth or nose or whatever, hair, that sort of thing. But I wanted to really get the emphasis on values and partly the drawing aspect of it too for today. It's kind of a light spot there, so I'll just paint around the light spot. Okay, let's come down to the face again. One nostril's nothing more than a speck. The opening in her lips is pretty small. She's just barely parting her lips. And as I said, this is kind of messy, definitely messy at this stage of the game. And this is the part of the painting where you go, oh, I don't know, this is not looking right. You know, this is the ugly stage where nothing looks the way it should, sort of thing. But I'm just going to, boy, things are really wet here. I've got my hand in wet paint. So I'm going to just take a second here and dry this. I like to keep painting, but it's not always possible. Oh, I'm unplugged. 1 second. Now, let me just, as I'm drying, I'm going to take a look here and see if I've missed any questions. You might be right, Carol. I may have another one on mounting and waxing. I should have them all memorized, but I've done so many since COVID. I don't remember exactly which videos I've done. If I find that, I'll try and link it underneath the video here. Oh, Katrina, 3 in the morning in Australia. My goodness. Should be sleeping, girl. So this is a pretty rough stage to my painting, but it is the skeleton, the structure of everything. You know, building up where the lights and darks are far more important than how accurate the eyes look and all of that sort of stuff. You really want to get the lights and darks where they need to be, and they're not where they need to be yet, but. I have at least the start of it. And so this is the ugly stage, the awkward teenage stage of your watercolor, whatever. And I was going to take some dark here and just give a little bit of structure here to the eye. Even correct my drawing a little bit in the process, but I'm just going to do just a small line here so I'm sorted out. And I'm not going to do a line underneath the eye there because this part of the skin is so light that it almost disappears into the eyeball, like into the white of the eye. I can see a little bit over on this side, so I don't mind giving a little definition there, but the overall eye, I don't want to make it look like an outline. It's always going to look like a cartoon if you outline the whole eye, or it's going to look like somebody with not very nice makeup. So I'm going to take and bring in a little bit more of my red, mix it into my skin tone, and that's going to give me a good sort of start to my lips. Well, it's a little too bright. I'm going to purple it a little bit. I'm going to put a little bit of cerulean into it so it's not so it looks more natural pink. And there is that highlight on the lips, so I want to make sure I'm capturing that. Whoa, that's very, very strong. So just tap it with my paper towel and I can calm it right down. Okay, but once I've darkened lips, boy, can I ever see that I need to build up those shadows more. And there's always this push-pull with your watercolor. Okay. Shelley Maria Marchio is asking how and when do I paint the background in this case? First, maybe? I could, but I can also do it at the same time that I am, I'm gonna put some background in here because I do think the color in the background and the lighting on the wall here I think that that's an important message as to why the lighting is the way it is on her. So I am going to put some background in there, but at the same time, I will probably do some of her hair so that it softens into the background a little bit. And because if you have harder edges all around the outer perimeter of the hairline, it can often look like a helmet, like it's very, very stiff. So I'd like to put the background in, then come in with those dark values for the hair, and they will soften a little bit on that damp, still wet background. But what I could do right now, I think, is I'm going to take and add some dark here. Let's just do Payne's Gray. And this is a good stage of the painting to put something dark in there, because when you get something dark into your painting, in the mid stages of your painting, it's not always just build from light to dark, but if you get something dark in there early, it helps you to figure out the values, right? All the rest of the stuff. So I'm using a big brush here, a big round brush. This is a natural hair brush. It holds a lot, which is why I like it. And I just want to come in here and now many portrait artists will do like they won't run off the end of the page that the way that I'm doing here. They will just sort of let it end there like that. They won't even finish the clothing, because they want the focus, all the detail and focus, to be on the face. But I'm going to take this off the edge of the page just because there's not really a lot of room for blending out that color. So I'm just getting that dark in there. I'm going to grab more color because this is going to dry a lot lighter. So I'm coming in just to get some more darks in there, but I don't want a lot of definition. I just want to have some extra dark areas. So I'm going into heavier paint while it's still wet to see if I can get a little bit more feeling of wrinkles and form to the shirt. Right, so it's just the suggestion of some folds and whatnot in the shirt. And so I'll just leave it at that. I probably won't detail that any more than it already is. Just that's as detailed as it needs to be. I will, let's mix up a nice gold. That's actually a really nice gold in this background. I'm thinking maybe a bit of quinacridone gold. Oh, got a little bit, still a little bit of Payne's Gray in that brush, so I'm going to try some quinacridone gold. But I also think that there's some yellow in it, so I'm going to use some gamboge. This one is, oh shoot, I got my color a little dirty there. Gamboge is a nice sort of egg yolk kind of yellow. I'm going to need a bigger puddle than this, so let's see if I can get this over on the screen. Okay, that's pretty good. All right, so let's just, I'm going to come in on dry, but I will work around those highlights and I'm going to soften them. And I'm going to come right up to her face, but not, but through her hair here. Not on her face, obviously. clean blotted brush, and I'm going to just soften up that edge. Soften up this edge too. Why don't I just paint? Now that was risky because now I've got wet paint on her shirt, and I'm going to go right up against it with gold. That's not advised. I wouldn't do that, but here I am trying to hurry through, and I jumped the gun. So I'm just going to go up close to it. I won't touch it, hopefully. Okay, so I'm going to come in here with this nice gold color. It comes down to about where her shoulder is. Make sure I don't get any surprising hard lines there, so come around and soften that. Keep coming around her hair. Staying away from that skin tone. The rest of it doesn't matter. It's going to be a lot darker, won't hurt it. If it blends in, I guess it doesn't matter that much. I mean, if the black of her shirt blends in, that wouldn't be the end of the world. Let's do it. Let's just come in here and let it touch. See what happens. Live on the edge. Getting to the point in life where I don't worry so much about those little incidences. A friend wants to buy me a gift when in China. Can you recommend a watercolor brush that wouldn't be very expensive? Well, there's not a lot of really expensive brushes in China. I think the Chinese watercolor brushes are absolutely beautiful. I've got a little liner one here somewhere, but it is these kind of calligraphy type brushes are fabulous. This one's a really small one, but I'd probably get a bigger one. And As for the brand, I'm not that familiar with all the brands, so I'm probably not the best to recommend a particular, a specific brush or something like that. But you can see, we're getting kind of our yellow color in there. It's a little bright right now. Hopefully it'll die down a little bit, but I can do a second layer of this if I wanted to. It's not like ultimately smooth and all of that. But the Chinese brushes are great. They do hold a lot of paint and or water, and they come to these beautiful, I don't know if you can see this, like a needle almost. It is so pointy. So if you were doing calligraphy of some kind or detail work, it's fabulous for that. All right. So I'm going to continue building up. I don't know what time it is here, 11:30 a.m. here in Southern Ontario, which is where I am. But I'm going to go back to some of my skin tone colors here. Let's get a cleaner paper towel. Now, I think I better dry things before I continue, because I just have a hunch I'm going to get myself into trouble if I'm not careful. One thing I like when you have something like her shoulder line here is blending into the background there. That is one thing that allows the eye to flow from background into the portrait and then meander on through your whole composition. Those little passageways. It's like an open door, and it keeps her from looking to cut out and paste it on. If you can incorporate a couple of those into your painting, that would be good. I got off on a bit of a sidetrack there, and I forgot about blending in my hair as I'm going along, but I think we're going to do another layer on this background anyway. Okay, may not be fully dry, but I'm going to work. I'm going to come back to skin tones here for a moment, and I want to start building these up, getting a little darker in some places. Now, some of the shadows can go from that sort of medium skin tone to almost a burgundy kind of color. You know, you start to get your color a little richer. So I'm using a raw sienna permanent rose. But at some point I could even make, I could bring in some burnt sienna into this and make that a little bit darker. My paper towel. And you might feel like, wow, that's a lot darker, but it will blend in and won't feel quite so dark. Both my water buckets are getting pretty dirty here. I may have to change them. Softening an edge. Lots of edge softening if you want to make the smooth curves of a face. And as you build up these layers, and one of the reasons I think it's really good to work with layers is because it allows you to spot things that you missed on the first go. I had a little drip of something there. I'll have to see if I can wipe that off. Okay, so I'm blotting my brush. I will soften my edges. Coming into my darks again, just to make sure that they are better established. If you've seen my Instagram, my Facebook, you've probably seen portraits that I've done that look like crazy smooth. Wow, does that ever look orange on the screen? I just looked up and it's like insanely orange, but it is not that orange in person. Let me see if I can make a little camera adjustment here to make that look a little bit less weird. Get my mouse here. This is like really crazy orange. I think the saturation is like a little insane there. Let's adjust that. That's probably getting a little closer. Okay. Hopefully that adjustment makes things look a little bit more normal anyway. But things are starting to dry. I'm starting to get into trouble here because things are drying faster than I can talk and do all the stuff. But soften what I can here. Another layer can often even things out. So if you get like a patchy face or something like that, the skin tones look patchy, you can often come back with other layers. That's the one advantage to working with the thin layers as well, is that, you know, if you make a mistake, it's only incremental, it's only small, because, you know, unless you put it completely in the wrong place or something like that. But, you know, speaking value-wise, the change won't be that dramatic. Actually thinking I'm going to use my, for softening my edges, I sometimes like my synthetic brush a little better because it's got a little more bounce to it, a little bit more spring than my softer brushes that hold a lot of paint. And I'm looking for a blotted brush anyway, so synthetic's sometimes a little better for softening. You could wet this first, but as I said, you know, you can run the risk of losing some potential highlights. I feel like this shadow here is quite strong. The one on the side of her nose. And it still doesn't look the correct color, but it's easier to cool down a color than it is to warm it up. So if I make it warm, cooling it down is not usually an issue. Actually, it could be a little lighter right through here. So if I were to take and add blue to this, for example, you can see I get a darker brown, but I can't get it back. So if I took a blue and tried to make it into a warmer color, it would be very difficult. But I can definitely cool down a dark orange. And kind of jumping all over the place here, but I tend to do a lot of that when I'm doing my portraits because I'm trying to keep things in balance. I'm going to rinse out my water here for a minute, and I'm going to come back and because I've got 2 water buckets that are now both dirty, and I'm having a little trouble getting, like keeping some of my colors clean. So just give me a sec. There we go. I'm rinsing out my brush, and it's not getting completely clean. So that's definitely a sign that I need to rinse my brush. Okay, so you're going to go from general to specific, so drawing wise, but also painting wise. So we're putting in the big shapes here, then we start fine tuning. So I'm going to I want to get a little bit of her eyebrow in here. Now the eyebrows are dark. Her eyebrows are dark, but I don't want to draw them on like a cartoon. I'm going to do them quite lightly in little strokes, and it's actually a good idea when you're doing brows. If I take I'll take a burnt sienna with a bit of Payne's gray, gives me a nice brown, dark brown. And I kind of do this to my brush, sort of twist, and I end up with my brush kind of with the bristles splayed. And then I use the tip of the bristles for painting just small strokes on the surface. I can get better look of hair than I could if I were to take a small liner brush and try to do every hair. It looks more natural, but I am paying attention to the direction of the hairs. My brush is very splayed. Not that I'm not as concerned about the absolute likeness. If I were really obsessed with the absolute likeness, if I was doing a commission or something like that, I'd probably use the transfer process. But if I'm just doing a portrait and I just want to understand the procedure, or what to start with and what to do next, and et cetera, then I'll just draw it. And the drawing process actually helps me understand a lot before I even pick up my brush. So I'm going to mix up more of my background color because I want to put a little bit more in there. And I'm going to get some of her hair done. So that's quinacridone gold with gamboge, which in Da Vinci, which is my brand that I'm using, gives me it's actually a hue. It is very bright. Okay, so I don't need to put as much on as I did the first time. I'm going to go maybe just a little more quinacridone gold. Rinse out my brush well. Here I'm just painting water because I want to keep that light. So all through here is just clean water or cleanish water. Now I didn't erase all my pencil lines. You would of course do a better job of that. Rinse out my brush real well again so that I can get this highlight area here. And that little weird blossomy type of line that I had there is smoothed out. Just doing it again sometimes will correct the issue. So don't try to stop and fix it in the moment. All right, so I'm going to let that just begin to dry a little bit. And the reason I want to do that is because I don't want a real shine on here when I actually go to do some of the hair, because the hair will just completely bleed into the background, and that's not what I'm looking for. Now her hair, I want to have that more brown, like it's a dark brown, it's not black. So I'm taking some Payne's Gray. I will put some burnt sienna into it to give me a really dark brown. Now if this is really wet and I put it on a wet surface, it'll go wherever it wants to go, which I don't want. Let's grab this towel here. So I'm going to take a little off my brush, and I'm going to start maybe here on her hair. There's that same little idea that I used on the eyebrows there. Splay the bristles, and you can get the sort of the look of hair, but now she's got a lot of stray hairs everywhere and that sort of thing. Now that's that little mark that I just put there. I didn't have very much on my brush, and that's an important thing to remember when you're doing this, because if you have a lot in your brush, it will tend to bleed out. And you know, there's enough Payne's Gray in here that could actually turn green if you get it running together too much. But the nice thing about doing this before the background dries is it will have a bit of a softer look. Okay, so that's going to run a little bit, which I'm not bothered by at all. I don't mind it running into the background. Now, there's going to be a bunch of small hairs there too, which I'll do with a smaller brush, of course. But some of these will just sort of soften into the background because the background's not completely dry. So that makes my edges a little bit more gentle. I like this sort of tousled hair she's got. It's a little crazy, and you might get a little overwhelmed with painting it. But if you're just using the tip of the brush and just follow the gesture of it, it can be sometimes more expressive than painting it to look identical to the photo. Although I'm a realistic painter, I'm not sure everybody understands it. I really don't try to make it identical to the photo. I already have the photo. I don't need to make it identical. I try to improve upon the photo if I can. Maybe not. Okay, maybe not in this case, but I do try to improve upon the photo, make it a little bit more vibrant, lively, expressive. And I don't mind some of the brush marks showing. Okay, so it's going to start to feel a little bit more convincing as these layers build up. And when I'm painting, I'm probably doing days where, like, I could spend days actually working on a portrait. I want to buy a round brush that doesn't come to a point. Suggestions. Okay, so what you're looking for is a mop brush. So this would be considered a round, well, I guess some people might consider it a mop, but it comes to a point, but only when it's wet, kind of thing. Let me see if I have anything that would be considered like a mop. Like this is the same kind of brush, and it's tapered, but I wouldn't say it comes to a real point. So this could be considered a mop. If it's a little more blunt on the end, that would describe a mop a little better. But, you know, brush descriptions can vary. You know, at what point does a skirt become a mini skirt sort of thing? Like, you know, it's all up to interpretation sometimes. All right, so this is I'm getting some nice fuzziness there. I wouldn't want to go back and correct all of that. I think, yes, I could come in and do more detail here on the face, but I would not even want to come in and build up more on the outer edges of the face, of the hair, because I think that the hair blending into the background just kind of connects everything. Keeps your focus away from the tousled hair as well. And as you build, if you want to make it like a little bit more refined, you can switch down to a smaller brush. I always like to keep this hairline, this edge of the hairline soft. You don't want it to look like a helmet or a wig, bad wig or something like that. So keep those edges nice and soft. So I'm using a small round, similar to the big one that I had, but it is splayed out, and I don't have much paint on the brush, just to get this nice and soft. If you put down a line and it looks like a hard line, quickly take a brush, rinse it and blot it, and get that line softened up, because you want it to connect to the head, not a separate part of the head. Let me see here. Oh, what kind of graphite paper do I recommend? I guess Sorel. I don't have Sorel myself. I have a different one. I have, I think it's Royal Langnickel is what I have, but it is not wax free. And so if you are using a transfer paper, see if you can find one that actually says wax free on it, and hunt for one that says gray, not black. Black is so dark on your watercolor paper, so you want to be careful of that. Okay, so I would come back in. I'm just going to do a little bit more, and then we're going to wrap it up because it's almost noon. My goodness. I'm going to get a pupil in here. The outer part of the iris is a little darker, so I might come in and emphasize that a little bit more. And of course she has an eyelid. She has a little crease there, so I'm going to make that one fine line here, just small. And looking at this, you might think that I'm doing eyelashes here, but I am actually following the shadow under her eye. And it doesn't come right up to the eyelid. It comes up to the under part of the lower eyelid. So there's a little gap here. Now, I know those of you that are thinking of trying this one out, if you work from the same reference I'm using or something like that, you're going to do a better job than me, because you are going to slow down and you're going to take your time. I'm dulling down the white of the eye here, as well as here, to emphasize that light even further. Maybe I could zoom in for you so you can see. I know I've probably lost a lot of you because I've gone so long today, but let me zoom in a little bit. For it to come into focus there. And I'm going to take a little bit of my permanent rose here. It's mixed with some of the skin tone, just so it's not bright. There's a little bit of shadow under here. There's a tear duct here, and again, now that I'm zoomed in, you're going to see a lot of my pencil lines, which I would not have left on there quite as strong, except for I want you to see that. Where there's a pretty strong contrast here is the outer part of the left eye. The eye on my left, not her left. And I definitely need to strengthen some shadows around her face, like shadows on her face. This one from her brow in particular is a nice sort of a crisp line there. But I don't want all of it crisp. I need some soft lines in here. And yes, you would do a better job than me on this when you're not hurrying. Coming down a little bit to the nose, get that extra dark in there. I've definitely made a mess of her cheek. So what I'm doing is where the light spots are, I'm filling in the light patches where I lifted off color. Just going to fill those in, and it will look patchy. That's going to look patchy, but if I fill that in, see, like right here, do you see that light patch right there? I'm going to fill that in so that it resembles what's around it. Trying not to overlap any of it. Rinse and blend some of this out. This is pretty coarse what I'm doing. I usually do a lot more polish than this, but the general idea is there. And where her cheeks are, they may be a little bit more pink. So I'm going to take a little bit of permanent rose here, mixed into my skin tone, and I'm going to bring a little bit more rosiness to her cheek. But I want to leave highlight where I need highlight. So I'm going to soften this edge, this edge, this edge, and so on. I can reactivate some of the paint there. Once you get some of the shadows built up, you can reactivate the paint on the paper and usually move some of that around. So things will get smoother. Just like I was talking about with this patch. And so if I were to take just now that that's dry, hopefully it's dry enough. Let me just dry it just to be sure. So it's patchy, right? And part of that was because like the patchiness, let me explain why it happens. The patchiness happens because the paint isn't fully dry, and I went back into it with my brush and it pulled off paint. So now that it's all dry and it's a little patchy, what I can do is reactivate all of the color and sort of smudge it around a little bit and help things get smoother. So I'm using a round brush here, and hopefully this works to the way I'm hoping. It'll work better with certain color combinations than with others, but I'm just going to soften things up. Okay, you can see things starting to move a little bit now on the paper. I don't get freaked out about brush marks in my paint anymore. I used to get pretty alarmed about it, but I've calmed down. I don't get so stressed about it anymore. And up here, like if I wanted to blend into this highlight on her forehead, for example, start with the forehead, wet that, come into where the color is. All right, now I'll just add a little bit more color here, and let's just see if I can get this a little smoother looking. So I'm going to take my skin tone that I mixed up before with my raw sienna, my permanent rose. I want it darker, so I'll add a little bit of maybe cerulean blue to it. Careful not to add too much. But she's got a nice sort of cheekbone going on here. Her jawline's a little bit stronger as well. It's actually right in that spot, it's a little bit lighter. So I'm going to carry on down into her neck area. Everything's still good and wet right now, and allowing me to sort of soften and blend a lot of color. So I've been asked to do portraits in my live streams quite often, but you can see that it's really challenging to do it in a very short time and explain the whole process as I go along. So I'm not putting the spit and polish into this one that I typically would in my own painting, that is. But I am hopefully getting across the developing of the shadows and maintaining, like, this is pretty much the white of the paper here in the highlight. I find too many people, when they're doing their first wash, they put skin tone everywhere, or whatever the flesh tone is, you know, whether it's light skin, dark skin, or whatever, and they put it everywhere. And the first wash, yes, is lighter, but they've lost the stronger highlights. And so their portrait ends up looking quite flat. Now I'm going to zoom out, and you'll see that it's going to change up the colors again every time I zoom in and out. The camera does another adjustment. All right, so that's probably a little closer to what I actually have painted. And I didn't spend a lot of time on the ear here, but I am trying to make note of where it's darker. Like this little tuck under her ear here is quite dark. And her hair, I would build up her hair with multiple applications of this splayed bristle idea. Really making sure I keep the highlight areas from filling in. I might tone them down, yes, but I won't fill them in. So this is almost white paper here. That's not going to do. I do need to get something in here, but while I'm doing it, I'm going to shape the hair. And she's got this real nice sort of sweeping over effect with her hairstyle. I'm just going to brush over that a little bit to blend it. So if you leave the highlights on the hair, sometimes all you have to do is just take a little water and it blends some of the colors together, and you'll get something looking a lot softer. All right, well, I obviously could go on and on and on. And I love to go on and on, apparently. But I think we should wrap this one up for today. It just gives you an idea. I think I might like to try another live stream with skin tone and have part of it done, part of the portrait done, and then just sort of show maybe just part of the face or something like that, so that I can show you the real smooth type of application. This one's a little bit less polished than some of my other paintings, but it's still the general idea of how I build. So I will do lots of thin layers, letting each one dry in between, softening edges as I go, progressing from a deeper, duller type of color in the shadow to almost the white of the paper and that sort of thing. So anyway, it may not be the best likeness, but in a hurry, it's got the general concept there, I hope. And so I would maybe dull this down just a little bit more. And on and on and on I could go, but I won't. You guys want to get your lunch or go to bed or whatever it is you want to do. I will take a quick look at the comments and stuff. Renee says, yeah, doing a part 1 and a part 2 is okay too. Yes, I have done that in the past as well. And so I'm just going to take a look at make sure I haven't missed somebody's important question or something. For those of you that may not have heard of Watercolor Live, that is next week, actually, starting on Tuesday. I was looking at the schedule and apparently I'm first up. So Watercolor Live is basically a virtual watercolor convention. And it is chock-a-block full of different artists from all over who are sharing their techniques for how to do things. My segment will be talking all about materials, general materials. I could go on for weeks if I was talking about everything, but just general material understanding for people starting out in watercolor and that sort of thing. But it is it's been described as a fire hose in a teacup, and it's a lot of information. You can register at watercolorlive.com, watercolor spelled O-R on the end. And if you can get a little discount if you use the discount code SPRIOR, my name, SPRIOR. So feel free to check that out, and maybe we will see you next week. Well, I'll see you next week in any case, but we'll see you then. Okay, so I'm just going to come back and say thank you so much for joining me once again, and see you next time. Bye.